2018 school committee meeting will come to order. As is our tradition, please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag and to our country. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a few changes to the agenda. The executive session that we had planned at the beginning of the meeting will be done at the end of the meeting, and the two executive session agenda items are collective bargaining strategy for MEA and negotiation strategy for non-union personnel. There will be no approval of school committee minutes. We have our rugby team here to recognize, so we'll be adding that right at the very beginning after citizens speak. Under Finance Subcommittee, we're adding what I would call fiscal year 15 unanticipated expenses. We've been looking at ins and outs, as we call them, on for fiscal 15, what expenses we didn't anticipate and what revenues we might have to cover those. And under Policy Subcommittee, we're just going to flip A and B, so we'll do background checks first and amended bullying second. I'm going to move the retreat format and scheduling and draft school committee calendar to next week. The school committee calendar draft that went out didn't include any of the additions and changes that I'd like to discuss, so we'll get that to you in the package that goes out on Friday for next week's meeting. Any other changes? Great. Anyone for citizen speak? There's no one for citizen speak. Okay, Coach and guys, come on up. So, Coach, if you would have each player introduce themselves and say a little bit about the season. I actually went to the championship game, so I've got a few things to say about that. What a game, but if you could kick it off, that would be great.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having us tonight. It was a terrific season. Fortunately, quite a few of our players are playing for the Massachusetts Select All-Star team, and tonight was one of their training sessions, so we don't have a full 15 here, but we have a representation from freshmen up to seniors, so I'll just pass the microphone around. These guys can tell you their names and maybe what position they played.
My name's Will Mozak. I play second row. I'm a junior.
My name is Matt LaBelle. I play prop, and I am a freshman.
My name is Don Lindell. I play fullback and I'm a freshman.
My name is Caleb Hurd. I play prop, and I'm a junior. Sorry. I think I broke the
I'm Liam Query. I play flanker and I'm a junior.
Andrew Archieri. I play prop and I'm a freshman.
My name's Rob Conway, and I'm the assistant coach.
I am Joe Lenahan and I play second row as a sophomore.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
How'd the season go?
The season went terrific. We came off a strong year last year, where we won the state championships actually in our third year of existence. And we had a lot of holes to fill in and didn't quite know what was going to happen this year, but we just kept going and going, and all of a sudden it was the end of the season and we hadn't lost a game. So we went 8-0 during the regular season, went into the playoffs, won the Division II South playoffs game, so we were the Division II South champions. And then we lost a heartbreaker of a game against Brookline in the state championships out at Fort Devens a couple of weeks ago. But the boys played their hearts out. It was a tough loss, but again, they kept their heads up high, and everyone was really, really proud of them. So it was a kind of a bittersweet end to the season, and we're already looking forward to next year. We had a terrific season, great bunch of kids. As I said before, there's 5 of our players tonight at the Massachusetts All-Star Select side, so they'll be playing with them for a few weeks, and then they'll be playing summer rugby. A couple of highlights at the Relay for Life this year. Our team raised $1,500 for the cancer cause. I think we're the leading club in the high school, so the guys all came out and walked and raised money. So just really, really proud of what we accomplished this year, and hopefully we'll keep this ball rolling right into next year. And we're actually having a mini youth rookie rugby program right here in town for ages 8 through 13, and that will start July 20th right down at the lower field, and that's free for Milton citizens. So if any Milton parents have kids ages 8 through 13, boys and girls, we're offering youth clinics every Sunday for 5 weeks starting July 20th, and that'll be in the newspaper. So we're starting, we're going to try starting young and build right up. But so far, thanks to you and all the parents and all the players, I think we've had a successful 4 years so far, and we plan to be here for a while. Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I recently only arrived almost exactly a year ago to America, and since I arrived, I've been welcomed, no matter what team I've worked with, been welcomed very much with open arms. And more to the point is the fact that Joe Dolan here is the main reason for all of that. He stepped up big time for me. He's really looked after me since I arrived last year. And he was the one then that brought me into Milton High School to look after the backs division. Since I started coaching with the boys, the main thing I noticed was the dedication that the players have. I come from coaching mainly in Ireland, where a lot of guys, I think, take it a lot for granted having rugby because they're brought up in the rugby world playing rugby. Here in America, it starts a little bit later, and it's just a little bit of a harder step for them to get involved later in life in their mid-teens. But with the boys that we had this year, they took to it so quickly. We had a lot of new guys on the team this year that had played it for the first time. They took to the game so fast that it was shocking to me. I'd never seen anything like that. And the reason why I think they took to it so well is because they're just such great gentlemen. They were always very dedicated to our training sessions. They always wanted to follow and learn as much as they could from me and Coach Dolan. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons was for our success this year. We had lost a lot of seniors from last year's team going into this year, and it looked like we didn't even skip a step. You know, we didn't miss any beat of the heart or anything. We hit the ground running. We started collecting our wins, and like Coach Dolan said, just right at the end, we just didn't quite go all the way. But that's nothing at all that the boys have to be ashamed of. They held their heads high. They worked very hard all season, and we've now laid a pretty good foundation for Milton High Rugby.
Thank you, Rob. And big credit for Rob, who did just move here recently from Ireland. I think he was a lucky catch to pull into our net. He comes from Leinster Rugby Club, which is a highly successful club. He's the men's head coach at Boston College in the fall, and he's also on the Olympic Development Academy committee. So he's looking at high school and college kids right now who are trying to make the Olympics in 2016 in Rio. And after 2016, I think we're really going to see a spike in rugby. So Rob's got his finger on the pulse of rugby, and he's a great person to have on board. So thank you for the assistant coach position this year. And thanks for having us tonight.
We're really proud of you. Playing for the state championship 2 years in a row is pretty amazing. You may be setting a standard that's going to be difficult to meet every year, but we're okay with that. The game was such a great game, And you're right, these guys played their hearts out. Rob, you mentioned dedication. It was obvious Zach was playing with an injured ankle. I don't think he ever came out.
Yep.
I thought when they missed that field goal, we had it, but
Yeah. It was close. It was back and forth.
it was.
It was a classic battle, and somebody's got to win. It wasn't us.
Right.
Yeah. And thank you for coming out, too. I appreciate that. And anyone else who came out this year and supported us. Big fan base this year.
John?
So I'd like to thank the athletes for their dedication. The amount of students that participate in rugby is amazing, and it's a wide-ranging group of freshmen to seniors to all sorts of students who may or may not be actually participating in an athletic team for the spring. So this is truly a great addition to the Milton High School sports community. To give folks, gives young people a chance to learn a new sport. And I'd like to thank Joe Dolan for introducing rugby to the Milton community. I think it is going to take off. I think Joe is correct, and his assistant coach are correct, that this is going to be a sport that will just be more popular as years move on. In Milton, as usual, will be on the cutting edge of having students already involved in a youth league started, and it's very, very exciting. The sport is here to stay at Milton High. The challenges of having enough field space are things that we have to figure out in order to be as helpful and supportive of this great group of students and this coaching staff. And I'd like to also recognize Ned Corcoran, that is a volunteer and one of the original folks that helped bring rugby to Milton along with Joe. And I want to thank them for another great season. This is one of the core spring sports that do so well every year, and I want to thank the students and the coaches very much on behalf of the Milton Public Schools.
Thank you very much, John. We appreciate that.
So for the viewing audience, Joe, how many students participate on rugby?
This year, we started with 35, and I think we ended with 32 after a couple of injuries and things like that. So, yeah, good numbers. And hopefully next year we'll have more. One of the things I can say, I've been coaching rugby for 23 years now, and in those 23 years, it's always been my policy, I never cut a kid. If they want to come out and play, they'll play, and we'll find game time for them. So it's a very welcoming sport, and the seniors right down to the freshmen, as soon as they step on that field, they're all brothers, and we really stress that. And it's a real community feeling on the team. So
That's great.
And so for the viewing public, Joe Dolan teaches at the PS school, but Joe, with that feeder team, perhaps for people who don't receive the local newspaper, you would put that on Milton Cable and let every principal put it in their blasts going on home in June, and I'll put it in my email blast.
terrific.
So we can reach as many families. That is a wonderful opportunity to create that feeder. And just like Mr. Phelan, on behalf of the Milton Public Schools, I want to thank each and every one of you and the coaches. You've created a cult here.
Thank you. I don't know about that. Culture.
And we have a school committee member, Mary Kelly, so was it two sons, Mary, or one?
Just one, Brendan, and he actually came and watched you guys on several occasions and was very impressed. He was a senior last year on the rugby team, and he said you guys were truly amazing for having just learned. So kudos to all the hard work you put in. And great time.
And he's playing out at UMass now, and he was training with the Boston men last night, so he's going to hopefully be
Exactly.
playing.
Yep.
So we had our resident expert on the school committee about rugby.
How about that? I was watching sevens this past weekend. That's how crazy I am about rugby.
There you go. I remember a few years ago you were.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mary.
Very, very exciting.
Ms. Padera and then Ms. Bagley-Jones.
So I'd never really seen a rugby match, and I was supposed to go last year and see one from the old school that I worked at Arlington Catholic. I think Joe knows the other coach, and I didn't get to go. But this year I was happy to go to two, and both those games you won. So I should have probably gone to the championship team, because then I would imagine you would
Next year.
But I was going to say, especially for people, like I had never seen a rugby game, and I didn't really know the rules of it, but it really is an exciting game to watch, even if you don't know all the rules. It's easy to follow. You might not know everything that's going on, but it's really easy to follow. It's exciting. And I brought my kids there, and they were kind of complaining, like, I don't even know what that is going on in rugby? How am I supposed to know what to watch? And they, you know, my 8-year-old son was like, this is way cooler than football. I mean, there's so much action all the time. It's almost like I said, it's almost like a ballet in a way. Like there's, and for you guys to some of you to just say you've just started playing it, you look like you knew every step, and it's a very complicated game to know every play of what's going to happen next and what's happening now. And I mean, it's so impressive to think that you're kind of new to the sport, because you wouldn't know that. I mean, it's just an impressive game, fun to watch. And I was going to say, I mean, both the games were very exciting, even with the, there were a lot of fans in the stands, but you failed to mention one thing that you guys did, because I was at the Relay for Life, and I think 2 of your members were tied for the pie eating contest, which was impressive to see. I think it was a tie at the end. It was a very close race. Impressive.
I'm very proud of you, Caleb.
And just to follow up on that, I have been very impressed with seeing you guys at a couple charity events and really having a very strong presence at the events, but also having a very strong presence at the Zumba line, being right up front.
Yeah.
The rugby team
Zumba was less impressive.
was there. I'm very impressed. And I was going to congratulate Caleb on the pie eating contest, but, you know, Becky wouldn't too. But just really impressed, because you could see the teamwork, and that you guys really bonded together as a team, at least on the Zumba floor. So I think you took it further, so thank you for making it such a great success.
Thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, thanks for having us.
Right there.
Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chairman Walker. Last Sunday, we had what was an unbelievable Milton High School graduation. Mr. Walker gave greetings. Mr. Phelan gave the keynote. Anyone out at the table like to talk about graduation? Speak to graduation? We have the mother of a graduate.
It was wonderful. It was very moving, and she was very excited that I could give her her diploma. We practiced in the morning, and I found out from all the kids ahead of time that they were always very nervous walking across the stage. So the school committee on the end to the right, we took turns saying congratulations to them, and they all really liked that. But it was a wonderful event, and I was very happy. So thank you.
I'd just like to mention that the Midwest was represented at graduation, with one of our speakers being originally from Wisconsin. So I don't know if anybody else noticed that. And I thought Mr. Phelan's speech was excellent.
Yes,
Okay, there you go.
Just wow.
It was impressive.
it was.
It was. I'm not even kidding.
It was a Tuesday night academic awards. Again, I wish that the entire town could witness the academic awards, and over $120,000 given out from organizations and graduates and families in the town of Milton. It was very, very moving. Wednesday night, we all went to the Boosters Award, and it might be a lengthy night, but again, to see those students, you would think it was 7 in the morning. They were so excited, as you saw those rugby players today, to be recognized. And what moves me at the Boosters, the entire team gets up there. And as Coach Lepresti now uses my analogy, that they all think that they're winners, and they all think that they're out either on the field or on the court, or out on the track. So very, very interesting. A very successful prom Friday night at the Gillette Stadium. Here's a little secret that I want to tell you. There was a delay on the highways Friday night, so the prom, I didn't go, but the 1,000 reports we got, so the prom, some seniors and juniors were late. And so at Gillette, they asked Principal Jett if he'd like to extend the prom from 11 to 12. He said, oh, no, we'll be closing at 11. I said, we won't be lengthening the prom tonight, and we'll keep that between ourselves. And so wildly successful prom, and then graduation, and culminating with a all-night party chaired by Ms. Sullivan, Paula Sullivan, and Roy Walker's wife, Cassie, deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Usually it's the parents of juniors who step up, but they went into all of the individuals who have ever served, and they take shifts all through the night, as do many members of the Milton High School staff, and it was a very, very successful and safe all-night party. So our seniors are gone, beginning to read the next chapter in their lives, and God was good, and it was a safe Matters First week, and the support of the school committee and the involvement in all of those activities. Your presence does not go unnoticed or unappreciated. Thank you. Moving from the seniors to the kindergartners. Next week is kindergarten screening. All of the parents of kindergartners who have registered have received their screening appointments. If you are watching tonight and you have a child who will be entering kindergarten, I would ask you to call the superintendent's office tomorrow so that we can work in your registration paperwork and have your child go through kindergarten screening next week. I could have Mr. Zulus at our next meeting, maybe talk to that kindergarten screening experience, but you have your appointment and you're ready to go?
Well, no, I'm up to first grade now.
Oh, yeah, you're up to first grade, excuse me. And so, talking about first grade, you might want to take over this next item. Monday morning, all of our first grades, our English pathways and French immersion first grades will be open for incoming, the parents of rising first graders to go in and view both programs. Our principals have communicated with all the parents and guardians of our rising first graders, and another communication went out today. If anyone in the viewing audience missed that communication and wants to do an observation in one of those classrooms Monday morning, in the English pathways, the STEM program will be taught, and in the French immersion program, I believe it's a language arts program. So Monday morning, our first grades will be open. Tuesday night, on behalf of the Junior Women's Club, I believe, the Milton Road Race is Tuesday night. Just a reminder to the viewing audience, we have school committee next Wednesday night, and I think the school committee would be pleased. The people in the office are really enjoying the replies from all of the individuals who are being asked to attend your volunteer reception. Remarks like, is this a dressed-up affair? How long will we stay? May we bring our spouses? And so, again, the message about being recognized and being invited is being very well received. The 8th grade social, another night, if any middle school parent wants to volunteer. They take volunteers, John? They do take volunteers. Is June 13th. A highlight in the Milton Public Schools is the 8th grade social. Mr. Phelan might be able to speak as he attended several of them.
It's a great night, and it's a very fun night, and the students have a fantastic time, and the teachers and the parents come out, and they do a great job.
I believe probably Ms. Sheridan might be speaking about the Saturday 21st later in the meeting. I'll leave that up to you. Last week, Mr. Phelan gave us an overview of the park testing, the testing that will be taking the place of MCAS in future years. At next week's school committee meeting, I'm going to make a presentation to you as the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is looking for school committees to vote on the participation in park. We're gathering data about neighboring communities. Mr. Walker asked a question about the calibration from MCAS to park. We have a question into DESE on that very item, and we'll make a presentation next week with further information on park. I want to just speak for one moment. 2 or 3 years ago, Mr. Phelan, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education created a new evaluation model that all of the educators, teachers, administrators, and the superintendent in all of the public schools in Massachusetts have to use this form, this tool, this evaluation tool. Through the contract negotiations, we agreed upon with the union, with some edits, the evaluation model. And so communities that were raced to the top began using the evaluation model, and then public schools really this year have begun using the evaluation model. We waited with counsel from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as our contract wasn't settled until January. They understood that we were using our existing evaluation tool. So we have been going through professional development, through our professional development time with all our educators. In this very room, Dr. Karen Spalding is doing the professional development with all of our administrators on the evaluation tool. We have plans for over the summer, PD, and actually going into next year to continue that support. Again, it's a very different model, different aspects of the evaluation tool, but what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education suggested that I share with the school committee and the viewing public, and I'll write in my email blast, that at the end of the year, last year, you would have seen in the Globe and local press the percentages of teachers on the different evaluation bands. And so this coming June and July, you'll be seeing more data coming out from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Because we didn't use the tool this year, you will not see data from Milton. The results of the evaluation tool and the percentage of teachers on the different final summative evaluation bands. But we will have that data next year, so I'll share that in my email blast so that when the press comes out, the community will understand where we are in that process. But I can assure you that Dr. Pavlicek, Mr. Phelan, and I have worked closely with the union, the administrative team, and the teachers, and the preparation that has been put in place is phenomenal, so that our teachers understand the model, our administrators understand the model, and we are ready to use this new evaluation tool. Very briefly, and I'll be giving you updates in our coming meetings. This year, as somebody said, I think Dr. Pavlicek used a phrase today, this place will be, what phrase did you use, Glenn? Jumping. This summer, Milton's hard, I know it's hard to believe that he would use that term, but this summer at Milton High School, there'll be, John, 600? Close to 600 children, you remember?
No, I was just trying to get a clue where you were going with it.
600 students have registered for Milton Summer Enrichment here at Milton High School. The Tucker Scholars will be taking place here at Milton High School. The welcome to middle school for rising sixth graders will take place at the Pierce School in June and August. Students who are receiving extended year services in special education will be serviced here at Milton High School. We have a Japanese camp that's Milton families are involved in housing the children from Japan. That will be taking place at Milton High School. There's a summer music program taking place at Milton High School. So we're having several meetings that Mr. Phelan has been leading and will continue to lead, get everyone ready for a very, very exciting summer here in the Milton Public Schools. And it does take your breath away when we think we have 4,000 students during the school year. And if you add up all these numbers, there'll probably be 1,000 or 1,500 children, Milton Public School children, involved in some kind of programming this summer. That's it from my report.
So Chairman's report, all I have left is my follow-up section. And I wanted to highlight the things that I have on my list. The superintendent and I have been collaborating, so these will also show up on the follow-up list. But there are a few that I think require some immediate attention. We saw a presentation on MCAS science performance. One of the things that I think requires further discussion is the timeline for improvement in science performance, what we heard at the presentation was that that could take up to 5 years. I think the superintendent and I certainly agree that's too long, so we'll be looking for an update on what a more aggressive timeline will be. Improving the SPED proficiency gap. We'd like to hear the strategy for improvement of the proficiency gap with regard to our SPED students. We saw a presentation on the Common Core. Member Kelly asked, I think, two important questions. One was, how will we be assessing Common Core competency, and particularly, how do we assess the competency of incoming students that might join us later in their academic careers. We talked about early literacy. This was the presentation where we also talked about science. Member Zulis raised, I thought, an interesting idea about a partnership with the Milton Public Library on pre-K early literacy. Vice Chair Zulis has actually made some contact with the librarian, but we need to figure out whether the superintendent wants to talk with the director of the Milton Public Library, or we should just allow Vice Chair Zulis to continue. But I think that's one that requires some urgency, particularly when coupled with Ms. Padera's idea about pre-K outreach for summer 2014. The thought was that we might be able to offer some activities, exercises, content to individuals that will be joining us for pre-K or for kindergarten in September. So on those two, I'd like to reach some closure on what our plan is, who's accountable, and how we might hopefully discuss that either next week or at a later meeting in June. Member Bagley-Jones highlighted an upcoming mental health services requirement. Again, I just want to be clear on who's researching that, and because we'll need to know where it is in the legislature, whether it looks like it's a go, and if so, how we need to prepare. Member Bagley-Jones?
I will do that. I was just in a meeting with Linda Lee the other day when our two worlds collided and they were talking about it. So I'll find out more, but it's definitely making its way up the chain.
Great.
And I'm not exactly sure where they said it was, but it's definitely coming along.
Okay.
I had another question when you're done, or should I
Sure.
wait?
Yeah, let me just run
Sure.
through, and then we can take
So
questions.
I will follow up on that.
Excellent. I'd like some definition on what the school committee park decision-making process is, specifically what the timeline is and what the decision points are.
We have, and to that point, we have from MASS, a statement that I'll put in the packet Friday and explain the timeline at the next meeting. There is a timeline before the end of June and then again in October.
Great.
So I'll present that at the next meeting.
May I clarify that? So are you saying that the school committee has a role to play in
Yes,
whether or not?
that's the decision from the lawyers, from MASC, and MASS attorney. And I mentioned to Mr. Walker that just today on the superintendent listserv, superintendents were reporting in whether their district area superintendents, whether their district would be participating in PARC or MCAS, so I'll have that data for you next week. We went to, three of us went to Hudson, Massachusetts. It's in Massachusetts, Hudson. We went to Hudson, Massachusetts for a session on, I thought we were going.
As long as it didn't feel like it.
I thought we were going to New York. But we went to a statewide session, and then our administrator is going to follow up sessions. But this is all happening right now. So you're not late on it, and it's very timely.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
I have a question for follow-up. Where are we at with the new position? That was I think you were calling it the outreach worker, And then also, and you don't have to answer it now, but also where are we at with the assistant superintendent's search committee process, whatever, where are we at with that? Those two things I'd like to know about.
On the job descriptions for the three positions.
Can I finish the
Of
list?
course.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks. Also on park, what I'm calling the MCAS park transition, specifically what the schedule differences are between the two tests and whether there'll be any gap in the availability of data, since we're relying pretty heavily on MCAS performance to measure some results. And then finally, a number of items on the 5-year financial plan that Dr. Pavlicek is involved with. What's the timeline? If there is to be an override request, what we project the size of the override request to be, and that would, of course, require a school committee discussion and vote. What the deliverable is from the committee, what assumptions they're using, and for our benefit, what the charge of the committee is. So those are the things I have on my follow-up list.
On the 5-year financial plan, I had put that down for finance subcommittee. Would you rather that done at the full school committee?
Dr. Pavlicek, do you have thoughts?
We're meeting tomorrow morning. It probably makes some sense to put it out at Finance Subcommittee first to get into the little details, but certainly no problem bringing it to the full school committee.
Member Kelly, Subcommittee Chair.
I think it belongs in both places, I think.
Yeah.
Bring it first to the finance subcommittee and then bring it to the full committee whenever
Right.
there's something to present.
Yeah, there's some things that I think require a vote, but
Correct.
certainly
But-
vetting that in subcommittee where it makes sense.
We have a very, Principal Dr. Elaine Jeremiah came forward with Coordinator Stephanie Nephew, and they have a very exciting preschool proposal that they brought forward to me. And next week, we're going to get a group of individuals together, and Mr. Zulus can join us, but we had thought about asking Member Padera to join us to, but I'll check your availability. And you could be the liaison to the library on this team. And they have a proposal that we're going to bring forward to the school committee. Just like we piloted full-day K at the Tucker, we have an idea about piloting the program using advancement funds for preschoolers next year. So they took that initiative, and they've come up with an idea to brainstorm by all of us.
And that would be available to all students or just students at the Tucker?
It's a pilot, we're thinking about that.
Okay. Was my bias indicated in the question?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And then the collaboration, the mental health, Kristen Bagley-Jones will take that over. We have a call in about the MCAS testing, and we'll follow up on the other items. The job descriptions for the 3 new positions in the advancement budget, I want to give Maura Downs credit. We researched communities that had those 3 positions, and Maura created first drafts that we gave out at Finance Subcommittee. We received today updated data from an organization, so we've actually made version 2 of those. So we're working on the 3 job descriptions now. And I know, remember, Kristen Bagley-Jones has that parent liaison, pre-K through 12. She's very interested in that job description.
I am. I'd like to see it.
And then on the assistant superintendent for curriculum and personnel, I've spoken briefly to Chairman Walker, and I'm talking to people in the office and making some telephone calls about the possibility of an interim appointment for a year. But I'll report more on that on the 11th.
Ms. Sheridan?
Just like Ms. Bagley-Jones would like to see the, one of the job descriptions, I would love to see the technology one as well. Please.
Great. Finance sub,
Sorry, just one addition to
Yeah,
that, and that's,
sure.
I think we should just have a finalized listing of the expenditures that we use, just to tie up fiscal 14, and say these are the resources that we applied, et cetera. I just think that would be a good for the year.
To that point,
So finalize fiscal 14 advancement spending, is that?
Yeah, you know how we had a separate sheet that basically said we were going to be spending this much on
Yes.
this and this much? So I just thought it might be good to say, yep, this
How
is
did
what
we
we
do?
did.
Very good,
Yes.
yes. I think that would be a healthy exercise.
if we move that to the 11th, Ms. Kelly, Mr. Phelan has been faithful to that list, and every time somebody has an advancement spending, Dr. Pavlicek and Mr. Phelan go right to that, right down to the purchase order. So we'll detail that for you. And we, in a leadership meeting yesterday, actually went over the 14 advancement budget and planning out the 15 advancement budget, so that everybody understood where the spending has been allocated.
Finance Subcommittee?
Yes. The first item is approval of vendor warrants. Seeing that it's sitting in front of me. Maybe I'll hand it to you. Oh, do you have the?
I have the number.
Okay.
It's vendor warrant number 49 in the amount of $386,104.97.
So I would move that the committee approve that. If I could get a second.
Could I just ask, is that the word for this week?
Yes.
And it's been reviewed already by how many members?
I will be signing off in a minute.
I haven't reviewed it yet.
Okay.
That's 3 so far.
Okay.
Hopefully one more tonight.
Yep, fair enough.
So before we take the vote, I'd like to commend the administration, in particular Dr. Pavlicek, for giving some more specifics in the data that comes along with the warrant. I had been concerned about us being asked to sign off on line items that we didn't necessarily have visibility to see how much was still left in the account. And great progress has been made on that effort, and so I thank him for that work. I think there's a little bit more to do, but we'll talk about that later. But I appreciate the fact that we're given that data when we're asked to sign the warrant. I think that's a great move forward in terms of the process. So thank you.
I would echo Member Kelly's comments. I had expressed some similar concerns, and very pleased with the detail that we have to work with now. So, thank you.
On a related note, there is one item that is not on the warrant because it's an inter-fund transfer. We have the second student school resource officer, which we pay a stipend to the police department to fund the salary for. So I have a separate document here that I'd like to get signatures from the school committee on, which will allow the transfer of $30,000, which is our contractual amount for the second half of this year, from our funds to the police department. We're not doing it through the vendor warrant because, as much as possible, I'm trying to keep us from writing checks to ourselves. And I'm just trying to do them as separate memos that we can just do interfund transfers on and trace that way. So this is something that the town accountant and I have worked out as a sort of a process for doing this. So when you're signing the vendor warrant, if you put a signature on this page as well. But in the process of approving our warrants, I suppose I should ask for approval of the interfund transfer of $30,000.
You should, and we'll take that separately right after this vote.
Oh, that's right, you haven't voted yet.
On the motion, did we get a second, Maura?
Yes.
Good.
On the motion to approve the vendor warrant, number 49. All in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Mr. Pavlicek?
And the second item would be to approve the interfund transfer of $30,000 to the police department to fund our, the second school resource officer for the half of this year.
Do I have a motion?
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
So has the school resource officer started?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And are we using the money, because I know that there was an additional fee that we charged musical lesson students. Are we using that money that we've been collecting that all year, right?
That money isn't enough to cover this. This is
Right.
also coming out
But
of.
we are using some of that.
We have some of that money
Should be
available.
using all of it.
Using all of that plus.
Plus
general fund
additional money, but that does go into it. And are we going to be charging that fee for students next year as well? Is that
We,
an additional fee?
I should take that. We plan to have that discussion in an upcoming, the working group, safety and security working group that the superintendent has, specifically because this individual spent some time at the Pierce this year, and I want to make sure if we're charging parents here that they're going to get the service that we're charging them for. So I don't think we have an answer to that question yet.
Well, and in addition, we charged them all year, and we didn't have the service
We
this
did.
year. So that, is something to take into account as
Right.
well, right?
Ms. Kelly?
So out of what fund will this be paid? Just what line item? Because it's...
We have, well, in next year's budget, of course, we put in a security line item to cover this amount. This year, we had $25,000, I think, in a line for an attendant that we didn't use. So between that line and the fees that we've collected, we should cover this.
So we will be using the fees that we've collected
Oh,
to
yes.
pay for that? Okay.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Ms. Padera and Mr. Zulus. Ms. Kelly?
So I am a little concerned, I think, to Ms. Padera's point, that we have collected funds that were intended to have personnel at the Milton High School primarily for after-school activities and to provide some security, essentially, and that really has not been provided year-to-date. So I am a little concerned about utilizing those funds that we collected to pay for that effort. Going forward into next year, the hope is that that position will be there, and I think at that point it would be appropriate to use those funds, but I guess I'm a little concerned. I guess I would ask, is there any other place that we can look to pay for those funds? I guess I would prefer to have that avenue be explored before we utilize the monies that are presently in the revolving account.
Well, just to be clear, that it isn't an all-or-nothing proposition. This individual, the SRO, was here and did provide service, but certainly not for the entire half of the year that we thought, because he didn't arrive until early April. So it isn't that we didn't deliver the service we said we would, but it is true that he didn't cover the whole half year that we thought he would.
Can I ask, so what of the music fee is each parent being charged for this service? Do we know?
Is it additional 20 years?
$10.
$10
A
per
year?
semester, so it would be
10
20
per
a year.
semester.
10 per semester?
And adult ed.
We would have, I would say we either have to refund the money or, I don't know. I wouldn't be comfortable using it for something else.
I'm not proposing to use it for something
Right,
else. What
yeah.
I'm proposing is the cost next year is probably more than that, the funds that we're receiving, so.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it is a tricky situation to say, well, we did use it in April, but, they have paid up until April for something that wasn't there. It seems a little, for something that we've charged them, said, this is what we're going to charge you for because we're providing additional security, and then we didn't provide it until April. And, we didn't have it in place till April, but we charged them right away.
Do you have an alternative motion? Or should we, doesn't sound like we have the votes here, but I can take the vote. Yes.
I don't believe that the vote is defining where the funds are coming from. It's
Right.
just taking a vote that the bill will be paid.
Yeah.
I don't, you'd appreciate this, I don't think we should take a vote if we don't know where the money is coming from.
I agree, which is why I brought up the issue, quite frankly, but in the motion, we don't identify where the funds are coming from.
The letter that I wrote to the town accountant specified an account, which is our security account. If we were going to use parts of because I wanted to come from one account to go to one account for her purposes. If we were going to use parts of the fees, we would journal entry those fees back to backfill some of this. So the letter I've written basically specifies the security line of the general fund, where the $25,000 is as the source of the $30,000, so it will run over. but there are other, that's part of the general facilities, seventh line, so there was room for play in there for this subline to run over and still be under on the whole. But that was the simplest place for her purposes, to move it from one to the other. So my letter actually says account 31,000, which is the security.
So let me propose a friendly amendment to Ms. Padera's motion. The motion is to,
Can I clarify?
yeah.
Member Sheridan was the one that moved the motion.
Oh, you moved it? Okay, friendly amendment, that we take half of the fees that were collected, which is approximately $12,500, for the half of the part of the year that was actually covered. So the motion is to pay the $30,000 out of the security line, but to use half of the fees that we collected, which would be $12,500.
I think that's overstating the amount of fees we collected.
Is it?
Yes.
I thought it was $25,000.
We didn't, there are, if you look at the music students, there are roughly 300, I think, in a semester. I think that we only collected $6,000 or $7,000, for instance, from music students.
It's in there.
There are other things in here. I would be surprised if we collect $25,000.
I'm going to suggest we do some more work and take this up
On the 11th.
on the 11th. But
Is
we've
that
got a
good?
motion on the floor, so either has to be withdrawn or we can vote it down.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is there a time sensitivity to this?
The police would like the money so they can pay their employees. This is going into their salary line, which they are running down at the moment by paying the SRO. So that there is a certain end of the year sensitivity to it. We don't have the,
I think you do.
it,
It'd be down the bottom, I think.
I'm going to suggest we take this up next week. We need more information. I don't think a week is going to break the police department's payroll.
music revolving is different.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question? So does that mean we'd also have the answer to, what about the parents from September through December who paid that $10 and we didn't have the services?
Yep.
What we should do about that? Okay, thank you.
Well, I think since I made the motion, it would be appropriate to say that since we're talking about half a year, I could amend it to say that we would take half of the funds that were raised, whatever that dollar amount is. I mean, without saying the dollar amount, can't we say we would take half of the funds for the time being and adjust it as needed, as see fit? Because I think it is time sensitive, and the end of the year, it's tight for people to pay their budgets, to pay their salaries, and I think that we should move this forward to be paid through the police department. I just think that if we're talking about paying half, it doesn't really matter what the dollar amount is. It's whatever the dollar amount is, we'll pay half of it towards this. So that would be my amendment to my motion.
So just to follow up, the original motion didn't identify any source. You're now identifying that half of the present collected funds from the fees for the music program will be applied to paying this bill, with the remainder coming from the general fund.
Couldn't have said it better
Okay.
myself, Mrs. Kelly, thank you.
Mr. Zulus.
A couple questions. So before this discussion began, Glenn, was the money in that account from which we're going to transfer the $30,000, did that include deposits from the fee collection?
No, the general fund account doesn't include deposits at all. That was a budgeted amount for the purposes of having, a security guard style position available at the front door of the high school in the evening. That was a position that wasn't filled. That's the amount from the general fund. The amount we collect in the add-on security fee, the $10 additional charge to the music, goes into the music revolving fund with all the tuition and so forth. So I'd have to go back to the attendance records. It's not broken out separately. It doesn't live in a separate fund. Similarly, when we had put into abeyance originally, building the fee into the weekend rentals, because we weren't even looking at a weekend security guard at that point. If we got to the point where we were going to do security guard or SRO on weekends, we were going to build it into the weekend rentals too, but that didn't happen because we knew we weren't doing that. So I can go back and back out essentially how much money has been raised, but, for instance, from the music fund, I believe it's more in the order of $6,000 or $7,000 this year that was raised strictly from music, and the other rentals I can work out, any weekday rentals. But that's the ballpark you're playing in. I think it's more in the under $10,000 range that we've collected in these fees this year, not in the $25,000 range.
So is it possible, given where you are now in the budget, to do that interdepartmental transfer of $30,000 from the general fund proceeds without compromising the fee proceeds, so we can figure out how to deal with that next week? In other words,
Sure.
Are they two different, can we look at them as two different issues? One is, we can pay the bill this week, and two is we can figure out next week what to do with the fees from the music program. Is that possible?
That's absolutely possible, because the second is just a journal entry on my books in the business office. Moving something from the fee account into the general fund is a simple transfer and doesn't require, going through town hall process and so forth, that transferring to another department's funds would. It is a slightly more complicated issue to transfer from us to the police department, because it requires all of your signatures and so forth and going through town hall. But the short answer is, we could transfer it from our general fund now, and then next week, at your direction, I can backfill any of that from whatever revolving fund you want to backfill it from, certainly from the security money. That would be a simple matter.
I'm not comfortable taking a vote of some undetermined amount, particularly since I was involved in these discussions early on, and the estimate of the amount the fees would raise was about $25,000. So the difference between $25,000 and $7,000 is a pretty big one. So I'm going to vote no, but we'll take the vote. I'd like to hear more answers to those questions, and also what we plan to do, whether we plan to make any refunds.
Can it be restated what's actually on the floor right now?
Maybe move back to our original motion, isn't it?
So, Maura, could you read it for us, please? Yes.
Ms. Kelly said it.
The
original motion?
Amended.
So, following Mr. Zulus's suggestion,
We would go back to the
you would go back to the
original
original
motion.
motion, which identifies no particular
Funding
funds,
source.
which means that it basically is coming from the general fund. If you wanted to
Got it.
add that, I think that would
Okay,
suffice.
thank you.
It was removed in second.
So could you please repeat the original motion?
I believe you might want to look for what Mr. Pavlicek said, because I think
Right.
you said so moved.
Right, I did.
Okay.
What Glenn, what,
Sorry.
The original motion, when I said it, or when I asked for a motion, did not specify a source of fund. It said transfer $30,000 interfund from the school department to the police department. I think if you want to say that from our general funds, that's fine.
Okay.
With me, anyway.
So
It's
I
up to
will-
you, it's your motion.
I will take back my amended motion and return to that motion. So we will transfer funds from the Milton Public School general fund into the Milton Police Department
Salary line,
salary line. Thank you. And the amount is
$30,000.
$30,000.
Mr. Zulus?
And is it fair to say that this bill, this bill will be paid regardless of the amount of the fees that we received from the music program? I mean, this is an obligation that we have.
This is a contract we have with the police department.
Yeah, fair enough.
On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? 5-1.
Mike, Mr. Zulus did.
Just as a follow-up on that, it is still my hope that these line item transfers that we talk about will be brought before us so that we can see what funds are moving and perhaps even have a vote on it. The next item is the fiscal, we're referring to it, or I wrote in my notes, the fiscal 15 ins and outs. And what this is, you know, the Milton Public Schools are not stagnant, and things are constantly changing. And so what we've tried to do is to write down or to capture all the things that we think are upcoming that require additional resources. And then within our present budget, try and identify resources that will help offset those additional costs. And so Dr. Pavlicek has put together a sheet. And would you like to go over that? Did you folks get a copy of the sheet?
No, he was going to give it out
I was gonna
tonight
give it
and
out. Okay,
detail
great,
it.
Great. Thank you. And so if someone in the administration would like to take us through this, I think it's really helpful. It helps me to make sure we're keeping our line behind.
The first issue is when we rolled forward the budget for fiscal 14 into fiscal 15, we assumed, of course, a static enrollment and static levels of staffing. One of the things we've encountered, except in cases where we could actually see that was coming, one of the things we've encountered this fall is we need an additional 15th kindergarten class. We had 14 this current year. We're going to need 15 in the upcoming fall, and at this moment, if everyone who actually comes signed up for kindergarten screening shows up, they'll be full. We have a lot of incoming kindergartners. That is going to require an additional teacher, and it's going to require an additional 0.8 FTE, which is what we have in all of our classrooms. Because it's a new classroom, it's also going to require a new set of materials and furniture. We had 15 kindergartens a couple of years ago, so we had the furniture for it, but that furniture got reused when we expanded our NEC program to the Partners program, so we've been reusing furniture. We do need another set. So between the three of those things, the cost of a teacher, which we use our standard plug of about $55,000, a .88 about $25,000, and about $10,000 for materials and furniture, that's about a $90,000 cost to add that extra kindergarten classroom. Now, the flip side of it comes with, we get tuition, of course, for children who are in those classes. We have a sliding scale for tuition. Tuition goes up to $3,700 for the year, but there's a sliding scale based on income, and over the last several years, our average collected tuition per student is about $3,000 when you average it across the number of people at various points on the scale. So with that classroom, which, as I say, would be full, we would expect to be collecting on the order of $66,000 in tuition to help offset that. So actually, the net cost of adding the full-day kindergarten class is on the order of $24,000 after you work in the tuition. The second challenge we have, we had the same number of co-taught. Well, actually, let me back up again. We need a second co-taught teacher in grade 2. Owing to special ed enrollment. So again, that's, we have a classroom we have with a regular ed teacher, but we're going to have to convert one to a co-taught. And so we're going to have to add a co-taught teacher, the second teacher for the room. So that's an add of about $55,000, again, using our basic number. We do have a little bit of an offset in that we have a co-taught class moving up from grade 3 to grade 4, a bubble class, and grade 3 moving up to grade 4. At the grade 4 level, the second teacher is in the room only half the time, as opposed to full-time 1.5 teachers instead of 2 teachers at grade 3. So there's a savings there with that particular class moving up. So the net for this extra co-taught class is, again, roughly the cost of half a teacher, or again, roughly about $27,000, that ballpark. A third challenge is our integrated preschool. We have an identifiable collection of children coming up who have special needs, who will be turning 2 years, 9 months from early intervention programs and moving into our preschool program within the next year. We, in the fall, are going to need to add a second class of the integrated preschool. This is a half-day program, so it's a .5 teacher that we'll need. And so that's an additional cost as well. Now, in the integrated preschool, of course, there are children with special needs and role models. The role models, we have 10 role models in the class. They pay a tuition to be in the integrated preschool. The tuition is based on whether they're there 4 days a week or 5 days a week. Again, the average tuition per student is, it's either $3,150 or $2,500, depending whether they're a 4 or 5 day week student. The average tuition collected is about $2,930, so for 10 role models, we have about a $29,000 offset. So that actually makes the addition of the integrated preschool somewhat revenue neutral. That's not a major cost. We will have some supplies, though, that we'll need for the second preschool, and that will incur a cost of about $5,000 or so for supplies to set up the second integrated classroom. Then we come to the fact that by January, we will in fact possibly need a third integrated preschool. We have a lot of children with special needs turning 3 in this upcoming year, many of them in January and on. So they will be joining us in the second half of the year. We're being conservative here and putting out costs that we think could happen, and it is very possible that that integrated preschool may have to move to 2 half-days in the second half of the year. 2 different classes, a half-day morning and a half-day afternoon. So there's, again, that additional cost would work out to a .25, a half-time teacher for half a year. So it's a quarter of a teacher. And again, there'll be a certain amount of half-year tuition to balance that off. And there'll be a certain amount of supplies to set up what would be the additional classroom. Now, granted, that's an afternoon classroom to a morning class or vice versa, so it won't be quite as much supplies. You'll be able to reuse some of them between the 2 classes, but there still will be a certain amount of additional, certainly consumables, to add the additional preschool class. When you put all of those various pieces together, you're talking about a total cost of somewhere in the neighborhood of $57,000 for the kindergarten, preschool, possible second preschool, and the variation in the initial question is where are we going to find money to offset some of that? One of the places I've identified here is we didn't know where our Medicaid reimbursement was going to be for next year because they have changed the claiming process dramatically in terms of getting permission from parents to be able to claim for Medicaid services. So we had only budgeted about $50,000 in revenue next year for Medicaid claims because, in fact, anyone who has to be claimed next year, we had to have a permission slip by last January. It's a very intricate and time offset process. And there's a certain amount of lag when they brought this in and being able to get to all the parents of special needs children who may not have a team meeting in the first half of the year and so forth in order to get their signatures and so on. We sent them all out to everyone, but we had to do a little outreach to try to get as many of these in as possible. But our latest estimate for claiming is a little better than the $60,000 we had originally budgeted, and it looks more like $75,000. So it looks like we'll have $15,000 to offset against some of these costs. That brings our cost down to about $40,000. At that point, we have 2 other issues that we have been broaching in Finance Subcommittee. In the advancement budget for this year, we had added the 3 new positions as a 2.0 FTE, the full-time outreach worker, a data specialist, and the information instructional technology coordinator, digital education coordinator, whatever we were going to call that position. 2 of them were half-time positions and one was a full-time position. we have been in some discussion as to whether the three of them should in fact be full-time positions. The difficulty in finding some of these people to fill a half-time position is not inconsiderable. And the work, frankly, is probably there for them. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done here. So what I put on here is the cost of adding those two positions up to, the two existing half-time positions up to full-time, which is about another $62,000. Again, being conservative, putting in costs that might occur, this is a cost that might occur. When you do that, now you're up to about $100,000 in additional spending that we'd be looking at. So my task from finance was to say, well, if we had to come up with $100,000, where would that be? My first one is to say we had budgeted about $110,000 and then cut it to $80,000 in additional costs for our bus contracts. It looks like now we're going to come in at about $50,000 over last year's bus contracts. That's good news. That means $30,000 I put aside for bus contracts we won't need for that, and we can apply to this. Legal, I was extrapolating what this year's legal was and budgeting for next year based on less legal services because we're not in collective bargaining. This year's legal bills came in actually less than I had anticipated, and it turns out that what we were budgeting for last year was close to what we actually spent this year. And that's a high budget because obviously without collective bargaining next year, we do expect to spend less. So I can safely remove $10,000 from the legal budget and make it up there. The phone service changes, this is an ongoing piece that we've been working with a consultant on. We have more phone lines than anyone could imagine. And they have been added at different times over the years through different vendors and at different rates and in different ways. And we actually are working with a consultant who is tracking down every single phone line we have, finding some of them don't work and we're still paying for them, canceling those, fixing issues with being on the wrong rate plan. And the cost for this for our consultant is basically half of our first year savings. And we are anticipating some significant savings from the phone bill, and I'm budgeting $5,000 here in savings in phones. I mean, it's they're intricate things, and you know, as I say, as they've been built up over the years with all the different schools, things have been added on and pieced together, and not necessarily in the most coherent fashion. And I have to say that I spent a lot of time filling out forms for Verizon, trying to convince them that the town of Milton is a nonprofit, which I think I shouldn't have to do, but I have to do nonetheless. So that there are intricacies involved on both sides of the fence in this one, that there's some interesting corporate issues as well. That brought us down to about $60,000. When I originally looked at the budget, we were estimating the number of retirees. We have two very senior people who retired, who on staff exchange alone will make up the difference in what we're looking for. My estimation is that if we need to do all of these things, add a full-day kindergarten, add preschool, and had to go, decided to go full-time on those other two advancement positions, we could in fact afford to do it. So that's just a report for your purposes. But it's what we're looking at, what we're considering, what could be on the horizon, some of which definitely will be on the horizon.
And I think, particularly for the viewing public, we wanted to make sure that we clarify on the advancement positions, this is the cost we would incur if both positions were full-time, but the superintendent will make that final recommendation and decision.
So thank you very much for putting all this detail together and for looking for the additional funding. We're going to continue to maintain this list and hopefully keep ourselves in balance as we move forward, and inevitably Milton Public Schools change and we react to it. So thank you for doing that. And that's, oh, Dan.
No, I just had a quick comment.
Sure.
This is really helpful, and I'm just really stuck, and not for discussion, just really wanted to point out the tuition payment from what I know of other preschools or kindergartens, that's incredibly inexpensive. I mean, it's a deal. And I just wanted to say that, because I don't know if people always think that, but it is. And then I just think this is so helpful. So thank you.
I spent more for full-day kindergarten for my son, who's now 23, than
I know.
than we charge.
Thank you.
Ms. Padera?
This is just a comment for maybe, to put on a future agenda. I'd just be interested, when we're looking at now, we've been talking about getting into a new bus contract. We weren't sure how that cost was going to go up or down, or how we were going to budget it, but now that we are in a new contract, I know there's some controversy about bus fees this year, and looking at other communities and what they charge, and if we're in line with that, with both our fee and our family cap. And also, I know those fees don't cover all of our charges, because we don't charge people that live a certain amount away, certain distance away. Is it 2 miles?
Yes.
And is that a thing that all communities do? Is it something we just determine that distance? Is it a legal thing?
The law is anyone K through 6 under, over 2 miles has to be transported for free.
Thank you. So I'd just be interested in comparing, now that we have our contract, how much it costs us per student, and what we collect in fees, and if we're in line with other communities with our family cap and our per student. And also, we have raised our fee in the last couple of years. Has bus ridership gone down? I mean, is it costing us the same amount because we have less kids taking the bus? Those are kind of issues that we're looking at. And it's not an immediate thing, but sometime in the next few meetings, if we can look at that on the agenda, I'd be interested to see that, because I do think there is an issue with the amount of cars that are going to schools now, and if we can reduce that with the traffic problems that are created, especially around the Glover, Collycott, Cunningham have the same issue. I think Tucker does too, with the increased traffic and the safety. If there's anything we can do to look at that issue as a bigger thing.
Can I add to that?
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
I would agree, and can we also have a sense of what the bus fees have been over the last couple of years? Because I do know there's a lot of controversy now. I don't think they've gone up tremendously, but it would be good to see that.
Thank you.
Policy Subcommittee?
We have a brief introductory slide deck.
We're going to have slides.
Slides of the policy
slideshow.
What is going on?
I was actually hoping that,
Do we just go late?
I was actually hoping that Glenn would
It's going to help, Mike. Nothing's going to help.
be a little quicker with his report, because I know there's a lot of our younger viewers who are interested in seeing the report of the policy. Committee.
They're really big shoes, really big shoes.
That is crazy.
Doesn't show.
Is it coming up?
And that's too bad for the viewing public.
You gotta make sure your AV equipment works.
What are we doing?
Oh, wait. Something happened. Well, yeah, I think we need the lights
right,
off.
well.
I see it now.
I mean, they're going to turn the lights
Wait, let's
down.
start all over.
He deserves the same credit that other presentations get, so.
I think we could reuse this for Linda Lee's fireworks.
I thought it was.
I don't know.
All right, well,
Oh, I want to see it.
There we go.
Wow, this is...
I think it goes without saying that the policy subcommittee report is now appointment viewing for many of our Milton cable access TV.
You know,
As a member of the policy subcommittee, please first let me say I was unaware of that. And second, the graphics look like Pokemon back, 15 years ago.
Admittedly, the production values are not that great, but it's a process.
It was good having to deal with the lights. We got the music.
That's it?
Yes.
All right,
Now doing some serious business.
now on to the substance. First are
Pretty much all downhill from there.
Wow.
Just keep the music in your head. The background check policy, the current policy, which you should have in your folders, if you may not. The current policy is policy ADDA. It's called the Criminal Offender Record Information, or CORI policy. It provides for background checks based on the state criminal offender record information, or CORI, which is in the vernacular, basically it's a state rap sheet. It's a check of criminal convictions and actions taken against you. So that's the current policy that we have that requires this information with respect to educators and individuals who have, let me get the phrase now, direct and unmonitored contact with children. So that's our current policy, which has been in effect for, I think it was revised at last about 2 years ago. Since that time, Massachusetts has joined the rest of the country and enacting legislation requiring fingerprint-based national background checks for educators. Since that statute was adopted in 2012, it has been vetted with regulations. There have been regulations from the Department of Criminal Justice Information Systems. There have been regulations issued by DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and by the DEEC, which is the Department of Early Education and Care. So all of these agencies have issued regulations based on the 2012 Massachusetts statute, which effectively parrots the statutes that have been enacted around the country. And what they require is, in addition to CORI, the state criminal offender record information, they require this fingerprint-based national background check for educators. And so the revised policy that you have provides for the two major changes are that the background checks required for educators now include the fingerprint-based national background check for educators, and that's called the fingerprint-based criminal history record information. So this is a federal database which will basically provide that educators and others who have direct and unmonitored contact with information, they will be required to give their fingerprints. Their fingerprints will be checked through this national-based system to see if there are any unsuitable actions that these people have engaged in. So that's part one of the major change to bring us into compliance with the new law and with all the regulations. What you have in front of you is trumpeted by the Mass Association of School Committees as something that takes account for the new legislation and all of the regulations that have been adopted by these various agencies based on that statute. The second part and the second primary change in the policy is to adapt the model CORI policy that has been issued by the Department of Criminal Justice Information Systems. It is there are some similarities to our existing CORI policy, but it basically adopts a national model for CORI policy, and so these are what the policy subcommittee recommends is to supplant the existing policy ADDA with a new policy ADDA on background checks, and the accompanying sub-policy ADDAR, which is the Department of Criminal Justice Information Systems model CORI, which is the criminal offender record information policy. So that's what you have before you. It is a lot. It is very different from what we've had in the past. It brings us into compliance with statute and with regulations. There are a few issues that I will point out to you that have been pointed out by others. First, in terms of the policy subcommittee's recommendation, we recommend that we adopt these policies in whole with some minor changes. There are a few acronyms. They're not defined in the policy that I'll point out. For example, criminal history record information is not defined. We would define that. There's a reference to SAFIS later in the policy, which is not defined, which is the statewide automated fingerprint identification system. So with some definition of those acronyms, those are the only changes that we would recommend. And now, if it's your pleasure, I'll point out some of the things that MASC at least suggests that we take a look at.
Sure.
Okay. First is, if you notice in the first paragraph of the first page, under the background check policy, about halfway down, it states that the school committee superintendent or principal, as appropriate, may obtain state and national fingerprint criminal background check for any volunteer, subcontractor, or laborer commissioned by the school committee, school, or employed by the city or town to perform work on school grounds who may have direct and unmonitored contact with children. MASC recommends that this not be a mandatory requirement for those volunteers and contract laborers and vendors, but that the discretion lie with the superintendent with respect to those individuals. One of the reasons suggested is that when you have volunteers in a classroom with a teacher and a teacher's aide, you may not want to discourage those people by requiring them to go out and pay $35 for fingerprints. So the superintendent may use her discretion in that case to say, well, I'm going to do my Corey check. You still do the Corey check. You still do the state criminal offender record information check. But she would have the discretion. In another circumstance, we have a volunteer who's a chaperone overnight. She may well decide that in that case, she does the Corey and the fingerprint-based check. So that's one thing that we may think about, whether to make those volunteers, laborers, whether that would be mandatory. And again, one of the downsides to that is that it takes discretion from the superintendent to have that additional layer of background check for volunteers and laborers. The downside of making that mandatory would be, obviously, you might have people who will be less willing to volunteer if they have to pay $35, and there are some circumstances where the superintendent may decide that Corey is enough. So that's one issue. If you want to think about that, if you want to talk about that, I can point out a couple of other things, but...
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
So the line is that you're talking to may obtain?
Yeah.
So doesn't that make it somewhat discretionary?
It is. That's the language that is suggested.
Okay.
So if you were to make that mandatory, you would say shall.
Okay.
You would
gotcha.
change that may to a shall.
So you're suggesting that we might want to look at keeping it as may, right? The way we have it written as may.
The policy subcommittee recommends keep it as may.
Okay.
I'm just raising it as an issue that and the MASC recommends keeping it as may, but they do recognize that as an issue that school committees may want to think about, whether that would be mandatory or discretionary.
Understood.
Okay?
Question about the last line in the first paragraph. The subcontractors who may have direct and unmonitored contact children must continue to submit to state Corey checks. Are we Corey checking subcontractors now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How does that get done by the superintendent's office? How do you? Okay. Wow. Good. Thank you.
And that's done under the existing policy.
Right.
Another issue that has been raised is who pays the fees. MASC recommends strongly recommends that the individuals pay the fees. The fees are $55 for DESE-regulated educators and $35 for other volunteers. The view is, I think, that this is similar to a license for professionals, and it's a condition of employment. There is a thought that the school committee could provide reimbursement for volunteers, for contractors. The suggestion from MASC, and I think it's a good one, in the policy as it's written now, is that it be really subject to the superintendent and a practice and a procedure. In other words, we require the payment, but if the superintendent wants to put in a practice for hardship waivers, she may do that. And the problem if we try to define in a policy certain groups that we would not charge the fee for, inevitably you won't get all of them, and your definitions will fall short. So and with respect to hardships, inevitably you won't be able to cover all the circumstances. So the MASC's view, and I think it's a good one, is that it should be a little bit, the policy should require the payment, but the superintendent and the administration can in their practices provide for some hardship procedures. That's allowed in law and regulation. You can do that outside of this policy. So that's one of the things that was pointed out that we might think about. So that's another one, how to deal with the fees.
Just since it's a lot of data, I just want to ask my questions as I think about it. So if I get hired September 1st, I pay my $55, and then I leave August 31st, I know it's good for 3 years. Do I take it with me, or at my next job, do I have to repay the 55?
It's good actually for 7 years. The way it works, as I understand it, is that if this superintendent decides that you are suitable, in other words, that there is no issue after reviewing the records are no longer kept, but there is a record of this was the person's name, this was the date of hire, I found that person suitable. Someone from another district can ask this superintendent, was this person suitable? And the superintendent can say that this person was suitable. That's all that she can say. And that district can accept that in lieu of additional fingerprinting.
Okay.
But that's in the discretion of another district.
Okay.
And that is good for 7 years. So another district could do that for 7 years.
Okay.
You sure?
So my question is similar to Kristen's, and it has to do with the timeline as well. So I'm reading here, it says the employee shall continue to obtain periodically, but not less than every 3 years from the Department of Criminal Justice, information services, all available, criminal offender, query data. I won't read the whole thing, sorry. But, so that's specifically talking about the query, and every 3 years, that needs to be upgraded.
That's right, and that's not a change.
Okay.
That's not a change.
So, but I'm putting that as the basis of my comment about the new, how do we say this, CHRI checks, the...
The criminal, yeah, I'm not sure how they pronounce the acronym.
Like query, we need a name for that acronym, but anyway. So you just said 7 years. I couldn't find that in here, I'm sure it is, but that's what I was looking for. And so we pay this money, the employees, pay this money, and it's, so at the time that this fingerprinting is done, they go and they say, okay, this person is safe, we could check with another district, as you just described. But there's no process for updating this. So if something were to happen, if someone during summer vacation, if something were to happen, is there a way that the state or the government or, whoever this national service is, do they notify school districts if something has changed on it? And I know, Glenn, you went to a training on that, so maybe you can help answer that.
They don't. The thought is that this is sort of like a line in the sand. You have at this moment, you're determined to be suitable, and the thought is that if you're working for a district and you're doing something, the district will know about it. As I said, the training, the report is out of date 30 seconds after you get it. I mean, it is literally a moment in time, but it allows you to just take a look at that moment. They don't update it. and you're not allowed to keep it. I mean, it's just, all you're allowed to keep is name, date, suitable or not, that's it. It's just, it's not a record that's even kept like a query, which is kept for a certain amount of time. This isn't kept at all. So it literally is just a snapshot in time. It's nothing ongoing, there's no updates. That's why, for instance, Mr. Zullis mentioned the 7 years. If you move out of state for 3 years, you can't even use that suitability determination from the previous. There are certain assumptions. The idea of moving from one district to another is predicated on the fact that there aren't any lapses in there, and if something had happened in the interim, someone would know.
And Linda, that's at page 3. You'll see the suitability, the 7 years, and the suitability determination. That's all on page 3.
Okay, so after 7 years, then everyone has to pay another $55 or whatever it's called? No?
No, not if you don't change jobs.
Oh, okay.
It's one and done if you're staying with that employer.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
So this is providing an additional check, basically, for all of our kids, basically. So I think this is a step in the right direction. And I apologize to the chairman of the subcommittee that I didn't bring this up earlier, but it's kind of strange to put a dollar amount for a fee into a policy. So I don't know whether we might want to consider rewording that and differentiating that school employees pay, one fee and other employees would pay a lesser fee or something, so that we wouldn't need to come back once the fee changes, which it will, and update this. It's just something to consider.
Although I think that the policy does say that the fee may be adjusted from time to time. So you're right. Typically, you wouldn't want to put this in a policy, and maybe that's right. I mean, I have to think about that.
It's just something to consider.
Yeah.
May I? We're talking about the quarries and the fingerprinting. And I think it's important for the general public to know that superintendents are notified from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education when educators' licenses have been revoked. And so on a very regular basis, we're notified and kept abreast.
Ms. Sheridan?
So just one kind of record-keeping thing. If this is our first reading, it needs to be noted at the back of the policy that this is our first reading of the date.
Yep.
So we have some edits to do to this policy, and we will take all of those into consideration and send it back out to you.
Yeah, so actually, the specific edits, I think I mentioned, would be at page 1, where we define criminal history records information, and page 2, where we define SAFIS. And those are really other than that, it's, I should mention that while this has been vetted by MASC and those various agencies, we have asked our own legal counsel to look through it and vet it, and so hopefully by next week, we'll be able to report on that.
So actually, the question that I have is probably for legal counsel, but it is going back to the question as to whether we say may be required to obtain or shall be required to obtain. If we opt for may be required and there is an unfortunate incident where a child is harmed, is our potential liability greater?
Well, I'm not
That's the question.
Yeah, I think we can ask that question. I'm not in a position to give a legal opinion on that. I think we should. Ask Paige.
It's refreshing when an attorney says I'm not in a position to give a legal opinion. That's good.
I'm not billing you.
Right.
My.
But I'd be interested. That would influence my opinion as to whether we should say may or shall.
So, I just have one more question, sorry.
Sure.
Didn't see me raise my hand. So, will this take effect immediately once we approve this? And then, so teachers will be, is there a timeline from when it, I'm sorry?
Already in place.
It's already in place.
Right, but we don't have a policy yet saying that it's happening. So if it's in place, are you saying that teachers are already getting fingerprinted already? Oh, they are, okay.
Everybody who's hired this year has to be fingerprinted as of July 1st.
So this is an instance where we already have a law, and we're trying to create a policy that parallels the law.
And right now, who's paying the $55 fee?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Not good, I just mean it is part of their license to practice, so I'm okay with that.
After I have mine done on Tuesday, I'll let you know how it goes.
On to bullying?
On to bullying prevention. This committee enacted a bullying policy back in 2010 after the original anti-bullying statute was enacted by the Commonwealth. On April 24th of this year, that bullying prevention statute was amended, and the amendments were signed into law by the governor. Generally speaking, the amendments were to strengthen the protections for certain categories, including gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender students and students with disabilities, and to recognize the potential vulnerabilities. Second, the amendments added new reporting requirements for the district, 2 DESI of incidents, and added yearly reporting. And then third, it also added the converse to that was the data collection and reporting mechanism that DESI had to put in place to accept all this data and create reports. So what you have before you are 2 alternatives to update our bullying prevention policy. One, and the document that's marked, and it may be read on your draft, that is our existing policy, which has been marked and updated to bring it into compliance with the new amendments to the bullying prevention statute. The second document that you have, those revisions were made by our council. So those are revisions by our council that were made to bring our existing policy into compliance. We have also been provided by our council with a revised draft of the bullying prevention statute, which includes the new requirements, but tweaks our existing policy. A lot of it's the same as what we have, as what is existing. I would say that what is different in the new policy as opposed to just the marked and revised policy, there are some instances where there are fewer specifics. For example, the bullying plan developed by the district, there are fewer specifics in the policy that our council is suggesting. It basically lays out a requirement that the district enact a plan with some general parameters, as opposed to our existing policy where there are specific requirements of the plan. I think one of the reasons that our council may suggest doing it the new way is the idea that sometimes you want a policy to be a little broader, and the implementation and the procedures under that policy to be a little bit more specific. And so there are a couple of instances like that. There are fewer specifics in the newer policy about staff development. In other words, there's a general statement about staff development and training. There are general statements about staff development and training, and fewer specifics. You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Again, I think the theory, and we could ask her, but I think the theory being that as a policy, you want to have more of a general statement, and it's the implementation of that policy that is more specific. And, to your question before, Leroy, I mean, I think that gives you a little bit more leeway in terms of how the administration enacts their plan under the policy, and it also, if it's a little less specific, there may be less potential for liability. So.
You sure?
I just
Or you can
want,
go to your computers.
yes, so we have it on our computers, but I just want to say the document that we have here is missing pages.
You know, I'll explain, when it was
It
copied,
was two-sided, right?
yes, but you can go to your computer.
Right,
And you
so
have
we
it.
all have it.
The two of you have it on your
Yeah,
computer.
I just wanted to,
Mary's has both sides.
That's because I had it at policy subcommittee.
okay.
So I think it was very clear what you articulated.
Yes, no, that was
So
really
that the one that's edited, you can see that that's our edited one, and the other one, and everybody has it on their computer.
And so the policy subcommittee recommends the adoption of the new policy, the unedited policy, with a few revisions.
Which is-
And if you want me to now, I can go through the few revisions.
I would like to.
So,
Which ones? Didn't you just go through
This
this
is the
one?
recommendation of the superintendent and the policy subcommittee?
we haven't had a chance, our meeting with the policy subcommittee was literally 3 hours ago, so I haven't had a chance, we haven't had a chance to talk to.
I looked at both when they came in.
Ms. Kelly?
However, there is a time sensitivity to these, because whatever we decide needs to then be translated into all the handbooks. So we do need to take up this issue, and yes, it's not as tied up in a bow yet, but we're in that process. So if we have multiple tracks going, I think that might probably be the best way to get it done quickly.
Was I under the impression that you would get it done in June?
That's our.
Usually you do one and then two. That's great.
Can I just,
Ms. Bagley?
just, I want to make sure I really understand. So this is the old one with the revisions in red.
Correct.
And all of it is in here.
Correct. Well, not all of it.
No.
Not all.
I mean, this is the
That's a full,
final one,
that's a full rewrite.
and these have the edits in here. Okay.
No.
Well,
No.
So they're alternatives.
They're alternatives. Our legal counsel has reviewed both,
Yeah.
has reviewed our present policy.
Present one.
And edited such that it now complies with the law. She also undertook a whole revision of this policy, and this is her resulting recommendation.
Okay, so are these red edits in here or out?
Well, the red edits, like some of these are just, I think victim was changed to target. Anytime the intent was victim in the new policy, she used
Okay,
target.
okay.
But all the verbiage is not the same in either policy, and that's
Okay,
why we're
'cause-
bringing both to you.
Right, no, can I just follow up on
But
that?
the substance, I think it's important to say, the substance of the edits in the edited version are in the new
Got it.
version.
So I just, if I can just say two more things. I do think it is great that we're calling the person a target versus a victim. That's a really big deal psychologically, so to speak, but it is what it is. And I really appreciate the fact that we put in, or it was put in, more vulnerable students around any of those issues. I think that that's really important. I think that's great. I'm not being clear. Where it says lesbian, gay, all those things, sexual orientation, everything. But my one question is on the one in red, on page 2, we cut out all staff members are required to report. Did we actually say to staff, you are required to report? Because have we been doing that? Like, so if you're required to report, what happens to you if you don't do it? I mean, like, if you don't file a report of abuse and neglect by law, you're in trouble. So that got changed, right, in this one? It's not as strong in this one.
No, it is. It's, if you go
I
to
saw
page
it.
3,
Yep,
it says, a
I
member of the
saw it.
school staff shall immediately report any instance of bullying the staff member has witnessed or become aware of to the principal or their designated.
Right. When I see staff are required, I think of 51A report.
But that isn't the same, am I
No.
misinterpreting
No, it's
that?
not, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, when it's, so it's good that it doesn't say are required. It says shall go.
I don't know whether there's any, are required and shall, in my mind, mean the same thing legally.
Yeah.
I think you're interjecting 51A where, I'm not necessarily, I don't agree that that means 51A.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying with the 51A, it is the law that you are required. is it the law that you are required to report bullying, or you will suffer consequences, or is it just you shall, because it's the right thing to do?
Well, go ahead, John.
I think the intent of the law, and then the intent of the policy would be that all staff report instances. And if a bullying instance is not reported and found out to be in existence, principals and teachers can be held somewhat liable for those lack of actions.
Okay, thank you.
That's a general interpretation.
Thank you, that makes total sense.
I just wanted to ask also to your addition of what the general, which was excellent, the additions, when we had a tutorial with council, the addition of the bullying by staff members was a huge addition under the law now.
Yeah, interesting. Good work.
So the revisions, if you think it makes sense, I'll go through the few revisions that we had from policy subcommittee, just to highlight them, and we'll send around a mock draft to show you. They're just a few little nits. One is a little more than a nit. One is on page 2. I hope it's page 2 on yours. It's page 2 on mine.
Yeah, these are right.
Third paragraph down, where it says, "For the purpose of this policy," and this is R, this is not legal counsel, this is R, so subject to her review, but it says, "For the purpose of this policy, whenever the term bullying is used, it is to denote either bullying or cyberbullying." I think it may be more clear if we think it may be more clear if we say that it is to denote either to denote bullying, cyberbullying, or both. So it's not necessarily one or the other, it could be both. So I think that might be a little, bit more clear. Second, on page 1, 2, 3, 4, under retaliation, we had a suggestion from Lisa Veldran, and I'm sorry, Mary, what's her position?
Lisa is an adjustment counselor, guidance counselor at the Pierce School, and she has chaired our district-wide anti-bullying committee.
And Lisa made a suggestion that we define retaliation, which is, it's not defined in the new policy. It was defined in the old policy, although it was defined in the old policy in a restrictive way. And so the suggestion of the policy subcommittee is that we define it in a non-restrictive way, using the same words but in a non-restrictive way. So, for example, currently the policy reads, retaliation is any form of intimidation, reprisal, or harassment directed against a student who reports bullying, provides information during an investigation of bullying, or witnesses or has reliable information about bullying. What we suggest is that we define bullying and we say, we define retaliation, and we say retaliation includes any form of intimidation, reprisal, or harassment directed against a student who reports bullying, provides information during an investigation of bullying, or witnesses or has reliable information about bullying. And then we go on to say that retaliation, now defined, is prohibited. So again, we'll send around something, and we'll obviously run it by legal counsel, but that's the thought we had, and we agreed with what Lisa's suggestion is.
So wouldn't that say student or staff member, since it's also included bullying by staff?
I think it says against a person, so, but we could, it's interesting. It's interesting because in the old policy, it's just a student. In the new policy, it's a person. So
that's umbrella-ing probably,
yeah, so
adding the teacher.
We could make that more clear, but probably person is more all-encompassing than saying student or staff.
It is, but I thought in the ad, you specified student.
If I did, then I read it incorrectly, because
Okay.
the new policy says person.
This is excellent,
Is that
thank
it?
you.
I think that's it. Is that it?
We don't have a closing?
I know.
We could do the closing if Glenn, I mean,
No.
we could just sit here and enjoy it.
I thought there might be some annual checks coming out. Full of hoops, small dogs.
I want to say that I'm very, very appreciative because we had meetings with the leadership team this week, and these are very important changes in the law. Thank you. Keep up with it.
And it was such an incredible effort on a part of the policy subcommittee and Lisa and all the other folks who've worked on it, and Milton continues to be well above the curve, ahead of the curve on this issue, originally and even now with these changes. It's really amazing. So thank you guys for doing all that.
Ms. Kelly?
So I'd like to thank Mr. Zulus because he really has done his homework on this. I come in, maybe add a little this, little that, but nothing much. He really has dived into this responsibility with great enthusiasm, and he put most of the work into this, along with our legal counsel, obviously, but.
Yeah, it's fair to say we lean very heavily on legal counsel, quite frankly. I mean,
Yes.
Except for the slide.
Except for the slide. That was all us.
Ms. Sheridan will give you some better graphics of fireworks coming up in a couple of
Yeah, real ones. My 8-year-old son could give you better graphics.
All right. I held back a lot this evening. So you know.
Okay, let's move on. We have a facilities subcommittee report.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So just a few updates of things that we're working on and continue to be on our radar screen. We are still awaiting townside approval of our off-site solar project, our solar farm, which is going to be on the roofs of the old Stop and Shop facility in Reedville, right nearby. So there were just a few things that needed to be tweaked. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kelly?
No, just on that point, I thought we had signed a contract. We weren't
Our
waiting
contract
for
is settled. It's that the town is also going to buy the remainder of the power. Their contract they haven't finished their contract yet, but
So
we
does that-
have contracted for ours, and that's done and settled.
Does that mean that they're holding off until?
No, they just started later than we did.
Got it.
We also talked about the fact that the Milton Public Schools is the leader in the state of Massachusetts in green initiatives. And even though that is the case, unfortunately, this year we were not getting any green communities refunds. I think sometimes when your bar is so high, it's hard to get to that place where you can make even more improvements. So we continue to keep that a focus and try and get money whenever possible, get some rebates. Glenn has already told us tonight about the telephone system revamp, that we're really excited about the savings that are being found there. We also have just completed an NSTAR energy audit that is worth about $12,000, but didn't cost us anything because of, that's a service that NSTAR provides, and because we have some wonderful people that sit on our committee that help us know when those things are available. And so this is a very helpful tool, a very helpful document for us to look at areas where we can make improvements to constantly improve our energy cost savings that are available and increase efficiencies. There are ongoing maintenance issues that are being addressed all the time. One of the ones that people will see in the town is that we will be paving the backside of Guile Road, the part that goes from the field down to Blue Hill Parkway. And we raised some issues about two issues. One is parking, because when there's a game going on, parking is very challenging. The people park on both sides, and it's hard to fit more than one car down at a time. We also talked about some concerns that I've raised here before about maybe putting in some speed bumps, that when there is nothing going on, the exact opposite of that is that people tend to speed down that road and go very quickly, and because it is a curvy road and there are some sharp turns, it can become dangerous if people are walking in that area. So it's an opportunity for us to share those, those concerns and have them discussed. And finally, the Facilities Subcommittee is really going to, next year, because we finished for the year, next year is going to look at our responsibilities. We take very seriously the responsibility of maintaining these buildings for future generations. When we undertook the great rebuild of the Milton Public Schools and renovating and rebuilding all of our buildings, the Facility Subcommittee is charged with maintaining those buildings, and so we're going to continue to look at ways that we can do that best, and are there other things that we should be looking at. So just wanted to share that update, and since I have the microphone, would it be okay just to give an update on the...
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I spoke last meeting about the generosity of the Copeland Family Foundation in sponsoring We Are Milton's festivities again this year. So We Are Milton is just a group of residents that came together after the 350th that said we wanted to continue building and celebrating the community of Milton. And so our second annual event is going to be held June 21st, as I told you about. There are a few changes that I just want to make people aware of. I had said last time it was going to start at 6 o'clock, and we are backing it up a little, so we will be beginning the festivities at 5 p.m. with something called a Wham Jam, a We Are Milton Jam, where on the big stage, we have some Milton residents who have come forward and are interested in performing, not necessarily because they have a band or they're famous or they're, from Berkeley, but they're just Milton residents, and so for 1 hour from 5 to 6. It's going to be a great hour of fun, and we're looking forward to inviting those people to attend. We also want to remind you that there are every hour there are different entertainers throughout the night, and the festivities of the fireworks will happen around 9:45, 10 o'clock. But seeing as this is our second year, we've added a second day to the event because one just wasn't enough. So on Sunday, I don't think I talked about this last time, did I? On Sunday, we are going to have Milton Music Fest Celtic Sunday. So if you like Irish music, this is going to be the place to be. It's, again, another free family event, and you will have from 1 to 7 p.m., 6 hours of Irish entertainment, including the Fenny and Sons, Erin's Melody, Cat in the Moon, Devry Irish, featuring Milton's own Pauline Wells. And we have a really exciting headliner that is flying in direct from Ireland. They tour the world performing. And I hear that if you're an Irish music fan, then you will know this band, Frankie Gavin and Dedanan. So we are very, very excited about these opportunities, this opportunity to have a second day to make use of all of the wonderful stage and everything that will already be there. A few more things is that you will start to see some lawn signs around town just advertising this event so we can get the word out. Not everyone buys the Milton Times to hear all about it or tunes into these programs. I know you find that hard to believe. But please, look for those if you're interested in having a lawn sign, just let me know. Check out our website, wearemilton.org. Like us on Facebook, that gets updated constantly. And plan on spending the weekend of June 21st and 22nd at beautiful Hutchinson Field overlooking Boston. So hope you can join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Old business citizen speak topic response. We have none. Next meeting agenda items. I have school committee park decision-making process and timeline and disposition of the security fee. Anything else, Mr. Zulus?
Could we add the second reading for the two policies and
Yeah.
for the viewing public, another policy subcommittee report?
Can't wait. We're going to talk that performance.
You had asked CDM to return,
Yes.
and also Maura Downs has been working on on our calendar, the data report.
Is it the end of the year report? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Sheridan?
I'd like to add an MASC award for review. It's due on June 13th, so we need to review that at the next meeting. I will make sure that that gets to Charlene so that it goes out in everyone's mail on Friday.
Great. Okay.
No.
Anything, Ms. Patera? Mr. Zulus?
No.
Just a private moment?
I thought it might be her, the MSC award.
And then you were going to add the items that you moved from Chairman's report.
We're good down there? Okay.
And if I might, the volunteer event, just a reminder to everyone, your volunteer, school committee volunteer reception,
When and where?
6 o'clock.
Yep.
Where?
Field Courtyard at Milton High School.
No one in the audience, so no citizen speak, so I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining strategy with MEA and negotiation strategy for non-union personnel.
So moved.
The discussion of which in public session
Community.
might compromise our positions.
So moved.
Second?
Well, here's D, in case you need it.
Okay, I think I have it too.
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Bailey Jones. Ms. Sheridan.
Yes.
Ms. Padera.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Walker, yes.
Yeah.